Dr. Maria Gilmour has been professionally working with families for the past 20 years. Dr. Gilmour is an educator and a board-certified behaviour analyst who has extensive experiences consulting with parents and families. And she's with us here just now. Good afternoon, how are you?
Afternoon, I'm well, how are you?
I'm smashing, thanks. Now, let's get to why you're here, because you've released a book called 7 Superpowers, How Parents Can Shift from Punishment and Control to Comfort and Success. So is it pretty much what it says on the tin when it comes to what the book is about?
Yeah, pretty much just a quick guide to notify parents, let them know you got superpowers in you. And this is something that you already have. It's just a matter of a little change in perspective. But yes, those 7 superpowers are what the book is about.
And what are those 7 superpowers, if you're able to reveal?
So the first superpower is the structure zone, making sure you have predictability, consistency, and follow through as much as possible. We have delayed gratification, where you can create comfort and uncertainty by modeling patience for your kids. Choosing the right bait, so watching your child for their shifting interests and being able to follow their lead. Total recall is remembering that your child's always recording your actions and reactions at all times. The 5th superpower is patience power. So you want to cool it down and model resilience with practicing a neutral face. And we got the fun zone, which is a no blame zone, and all who enter there are innocent. And then people presence, where you let your child know and feel that you have their back no matter what.
Yeah. Which of those would you say is the most effective, maybe?
I would say structure zone. That's number 1. And, really a lot of families struggle with having just a little bit of routine around things. And so that's the one superpower, that we all have the ability to do that, which is why we have night and day, why we go to sleep, why we have scheduled meals. It's just, that can be a challenge for parents, especially parents who have kids with a lot of behaviors.
Yeah. Why do you think it is a challenge?
I think that life just tosses all these uncertainties every day. So we don't really know what to expect in our own lives. How can we create that structure? So it takes a little bit of effort, or I would say a lot of effort, especially if you have more than one child, or if you have one child who you're fully focused on. It can be very difficult to kind of see where you set up those that structure zone for the child, if it's something that you're not used to doing.
Yeah. So how did you come about creating these superpowers? I mean, is this something that you did come up with? Because, I don't think this is a concept that we're familiar with generally, are we?
Well, I think that there's been attempts to help parents in the moment. When you see a meltdown at the grocery store, parents really want to have something in their back pocket. This is what I need to do right now. And in the moment, it can be very difficult. And so that's why I challenge parents to really take these 7 superpowers and see just a little bit each day. I can put some structure in here. I can practice patience. Maybe I need to take a time out from my own kids and make that happen throughout the day. So I think that we struggle because we don't know the power that we actually have. But once we realize it and start to practice it, it becomes easier.
Yeah. And it's interesting about the meltdown in a shop, because there are some kids that are quite noisy and disruptive in public places, and others that are always well behaved, or seem to be. Why is there such a difference between children?
Well, that's a great question. I don't know if I can answer that. I have a crystal ball, and really, I've worked with children who have an incredibly structured environment, and their nervous system's out of whack for whatever reason. There could be a million different reasons why a child has a behavior, but what we know is we can be proactive, and we can set up the environment for success if we're constantly coming back to the basics. And it's impossible for us to say, like, when I work with babies, that baby's going to turn into a real chill teenager, or this baby, it's impossible. So I think that we just have to embrace our uniqueness as human beings, and parents just do the best that they can and keep bringing it back to the basics, because that's what kids want, is that stability and comfort.
Yeah. And does the book teach us sort of how to use the superpowers as well? Because maybe there's some parents that know they exist, but they don't know how to put them in effect.
That's what I tried to do, is give real life examples of my experience with these superpowers as a kid, because my mother and father, the superpowers became incredibly obvious to me as I was working as a professional in the field. I could see, oh, my parents did this. That helped me in understanding, even though I thought I was a difficult kid. I'm sure I was a really hard teenager, white knuckling my way, trying to get my way. But my parents were rocks. They did not move. They, so the book talks about those stories. So it's actually bringing this to life, these ideas to life.
Yeah. And who would you say is the ideal target audience? Could it be anyone, really? Because parenting is hard no matter who you are and no matter who your kids are.
I agree. I think it can be beneficial to anyone. I think parents, obviously, but it's interesting because I have been getting the most feedback from grandparents. I had the most positive feedback from grandparents saying, now I understand the dynamics of my adult children's lives and raising my grandchildren. And so I think that was really interesting to see. But I would say parents, godparents, siblings, aunts, uncles, you name it, you're alive. These tactics, these superpowers should help you.
Yeah, that's interesting that grandparents are mainly coming back with the positive feedback, because you wouldn't expect them to even read the book, would you?
I did not expect. I published first the print-only copy, so I thought maybe it was an older population, or we have younger grandparents too. And then once the Kindle version came out, I think that's when we had younger parents.
So what made you want to write this book in the first place?
I just want to reach parents, any location, any culture, and just in any, if they need help, I want to give them this message, because I've done, so many years in the field and gone to many years of schooling around this, but there's really nothing that can teach you these skills unless you practice that yourself. And they're not really skills, they are innate powers that we have. And so I really wanted this book to help parents realize what they already have in them, and something to be really quick and easy for them to refer to. So like the last page of the book, you could rip right out, and it has the 7 superpowers defined for you. But it's just a real quick way to be able to kind of reset in the moment.
Yeah. And of course, there are 7 superpowers. Do you think that there could be more if you were to maybe think about it even more?
I'm sure there are many, many more. I chose 7 because that is the digit span that from the psychologists, from the 1950s, of saying that humans can retain 7 small bits of information on a regular basis. So that was the reason why I chose that number, but I'm sure there are many others. But I see a lot of the superpowers fall under others, so if you have the structure down, you got to have some patience for that, right? So they kind of all fall under one another.
Yeah. And can the superpowers lose effectiveness over time? Maybe your children kind of cotton on to what you're trying to do.
Yes. Especially the teenagers, they can try to smart you. And that's where I say, like, choosing the right bait. When they get to be teenagers, they're no longer little kids. They have shifting interests. They want to be on their phones, not just because they want to maybe isolate from you. That could be a reason, but because that's their social world. And so getting into Justin Bieber and all those different things that they're into, and also talking with them often, so that shifting interest is really difficult sometimes, because kids can develop at quicker rates than they did before.
Yeah. I suppose the whole technology thing is completely new, and parents today can't really get advice from parents tomorrow because technology didn't exist.
Exactly. Yes. And that's actually the issue, is that I wanted to help with, is that parents can access any kind of education through technology by Googling best parenting advice ever, and don't know if that's the best advice. And I've seen so many of my patients over the years who have tried many other methods and said, oh, well, this was the way to go. I wasn't going to come over to you because I was told that, it was too rigid or something. And it's it's like, oh, well, that's definitely not our approach. But to get parents the right message, because I think there's just way too much information out there on our fingertips. We're able to Google anything these days.
Yeah. As well, sitting round a table as a family for dinner, I don't know how much you'd know, but does that happen much anymore? Because it's always surprising when there's some sort of study and it's like hardly anyone does it.
Right, right. And that's probably been the biggest piece of feedback I've gotten. That's like, that people don't do that anymore. I said, you know what? I don't do that all the time too, but I do it as much as possible because I like that idea for structure. But it might not be having a meal together. You might not be all at home at the same time at 6 o'clock at dinner. We're all on different schedules. But if you just have some sort of routine in your schedule, some sort of structure that you're putting in place where you can spend time together, I do think that the mealtime is more of a 1950s kind of like reminiscing about how I grew up in the 80s and 90s, but it was still it was an expectation in my home. I just know now that is definitely not what families can pull off, and I do not blame them one bit.
Yeah.
It's the concept of having that type of structure.
Yeah, I suppose it just comes down to busy schedules, doesn't it? Let's say the dad doesn't come home from work until 7 and one of the children's got to go to swimming lessons at that time. It's not going to work out some days.
Absolutely. Yeah, we have neighbors who are nurses, and he was telling me he never gets to see his child during the week because when he gets home. And so that's why having that coveted time with his daughter on the weekends, or it's still going to help with that child development. That structure is going to be in place. So You're right. Everybody's so busy and things are so uncertain. If there's just a little bit of routine we can put in our lives, we might be a little bit happier.
Yeah. So in your 20 years experience of working with parents, what would you say have been the biggest lessons that you've learned?
I would say that coming in as a young behavior analyst 20 years ago, I was pretty sure that my methods worked, right? All evidence-based tactics. It's like you're pretty sure. I would say that working all these years with a variety of needs and families, there is definitely uncertainty. You do not know everything. So I would say that I've been thrown for a loop many, many times. It's like, oh, you're the professional, you're supposed to know what to do. Well, sometimes you need to take a step back and say, hey, I need to gather some information here. So a lot, I would say that the path went in a different direction for me, where I started to focus more on the caregiver education piece, because coming into the home and working one-to-one with the child, very beneficial for sure. But if the moment I leave, there's no carryover, then the family loses out, the child loses out, and then they become dependent on someone else to provide that support. So I really saw the importance of building capacity in each individual home, and what might be, right for one home might not be for another. You have to context.
Yeah, that's the thing. In the book, are there solutions that work for everyone, I take it?
I would say yes. It is really on the proactive side. So I say there's really no one size fits all. It takes the creativity of the caregiver and the child to respond.
Yeah.
And so it's really outside the box. There's nothing really incredibly prescriptive in the book, let's say, but just that's the idea is that you've got this already. It's part of who we are as human beings, and we all strive for. Yeah. So, that is the idea. I don't want people to think that this is just you do all these things and your life will change. It is a process.
Yeah. And did you ever think that you would write a book about your work, kind of, when you first started out?
I had this on my goal list for maybe the last 15 years, and I've been piece by piece. It started as being different, and then I whittled it down to my own experience as a child. And how I've learned that through my academic and my experience, all of my prep to get here was really what I experienced as a kid. Yeah. So I would say, yes, I had this plan for many, many years, and then finally just locked down the last 10 months to finish it out.
What was it that made you want to finally get it done now?
Well, I really wanted to, I work with a lot of families overseas in many different countries, and I just hear over and over again again, we don't have these services. We need this help. We need just a little bit of direction. And so I just wanted to get something that hopefully is powerful enough that if anybody could take, something from the 7 superpowers and apply it in their life, that they'll have a positive change, then I'll know that, my mission's accomplished.
Yeah. In the book as well, you use stories, don't you, and illustrations to sort of help portray these superpowers, right?
Right. Yes. These are all real stories that happened to me, happened in my family. And then Gene, our amazing illustrator, brought those stories to life in his pictures.
Yeah. I suppose the book is for parents. So do you still think that illustrations work for adults, even though they would typically be associated, well, cartoony ones anyway, with children's books?
It's interesting because I hear friends of mine who say, we got your book and my kid thinks it's theirs. They're reading the book because they look at the pictures. I said, oh, that's really not for them, but that's okay. They can probably get along. It is intended for parents. I'm a visual learner. I like multimodal instruction. So I like to talk about these ideas. I like to see them in action. And I like to have a visual piece. For when I think about parents and how they are so pressed for time, how can you sit down and read, heavy text, 200 pages? Like it's impossible. So I have friends and family members who have told me, oh, I'm getting through the book, a chapter a week or something. That's all they have time for. Yeah. Even the book is a really quick read. If you sit down, it could be like 45 minutes, So I think that the illustrations really help move everything along and make the read a lot quicker.
Yeah. And how many chapters are there? Is it one for each superpower?
There's an introduction and then 7 chapters. Yes.
Yes. And how many pages are there? You say, 45 minutes to read the whole book. So I guess it's quite short chapters.
Yes, 100 pages, with it's about 104 pages, but there's lots of illustrations throughout there.
Yeah. For a relatively short book, it's still packed with information, isn't it? You can certainly learn a lot from it.
I hope so.
Do you think that you could write another book, maybe more superpowers, or something completely different?
I think I want to see how this is received, and see how it's helpful, and I'll take the feedback. I always had an idea of writing a series. Siblings would be really the first one. I think siblings can learn a lot from knowing the superpowers that they have to help their siblings. Then I really wanted grandparents, relatives, teachers, etc. But I do think that I want to see how this does, and but I would love to write more books in the future.
Yeah, siblings is interesting because does it depend on whether they're the older or the younger sibling, what things they're going to have to do?
They're part of the environment, right? So they're modeling behaviors, they're modeling what to do, what not to do all the time. I learn so much from my siblings, older and younger.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this book is called 7 Superpowers, How Parents Can Shift from Punishment and Control to Comfort and Success, by Dr. Maria Gilmour, of course. Where are all the places that we're able to find it?
Right now it's on Amazon.
Excellent. And where can we keep up to date with you as well? Do you have a website and places?
I do. I have 7superpowers.com is the website for my book. You could email me through there if you want to get a hold of me. And I also have Applied Behavior Analysis Agency where we provide parent education services, and that's winsolutions.com, WYNE.
Well, many thanks for joining us today. It's been great to have you on the show.
Thank you so much.